Yo guys, tomato sauce in here. It has been a little while since the last video. I want to welcome you back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at all melee DPS in 10.2. How do they look from a PvP standpoint? How do they look from a PVE standpoint? So Raid and Mythic Plus. And how will they feel just as a main, right? Going into the next patch of Dragonflight. So there's a ton of new set bonuses coming out. A lot of these set bonuses have completely changed the way these classes play, and other set bonuses have enabled builds that I've actually popularized in this expansion. So some very cool stuff coming on or going on in 10.2. Let's get down into it, and we'll start with one of my favorite classes in the game, my main through many expansions, the Arms Warrior. Right, so going into 10.2. You have a very, very interesting set bonus for Arms Warriors, right? So you have the 2 set bonus. You have rend damage is increased by 30%. It has a chance to trigger sudden death. And then on top of that, the 4 set, sudden death also causes your next execute to cut deeply, causing the target to bleed for 50% of the damage of the execute. And then it also triggers a thunderclap that deals 100% additional damage. So some very cool synergies that exist within this set bonus. First of all, rend damage, just doing 30% additional damage, is kind of huge, because if you take that Thunderous Roar talent and then the bleed talents and the bleed tree, that 30% is probably going to be multiplicative, with all of the other talents that are happening that you can take in the Arms Warrior tree. So they're just hyper buffing the bleeds build. And then on top of that, the 4 set bonus, you've got a new bleed coming into the bleeds build. Every time you execute with sudden death, target's going to bleed for 50% of the damage of the execute, which is absolutely huge. And then whenever you trigger that thunderclap, you're going to apply rend to everybody around you if you take the Blood and Thunder talent. So and that's going to be a hyper buffed rend from the set bonus and all the talents in the bleed tree. So Haste Arms Warrior still on the menu. Haste Mastery Arms Warrior is going to be on your menu for PvP, PvE, everything. Essentially, it's going to feel very good to play an Arms Warrior. You already have the best sustain in the game, and then on top of that, you're getting a new Safeguard talent. You're going to have 2 charges of Intervene. You're going to be able to keep your teammates alive. I think Arms is looking extremely, extremely strong. You're going to be focused on multi-target cleave. Anytime you queue into a double melee lobby, you're going to absolutely smash it on an Arms Warrior. More than that, demo locks, look out, because Arms Warriors are, they're coming after you hard. I would say Arms Warrior probably falls into the Super Gosu tier. That's right, boys. We have a Super Gosu tier, a Dog Water tier, and then 3 homies in the middle, right? A, B, and C. I would say Arms Warrior definitely falls into Super Gosu. I think it's going to be great in Mythic Plus. PvP, my thoughts on it. Every season I play it a bit, and just experience the joy that it is to play an Arms Warrior. Windwalker Monk. Moving on, right? Windwalker Monk. I think Windwalker Monk is in a very interesting place. Some people don't like this set bonus, but in any MMO that I've ever played, especially WoW, I love additional CDR that you can get from any means, right? So Windwalker's got a lot of cooldown reduction. That's what CDR means. It's got a lot of cooldown reduction built into the spec. You first of all, every time you blackout kick, you're lowering the cooldown on Rising Sun Kick and Fist of Fury. In addition to that, Windwalker is getting a set bonus built out around CDR, right? So cooldown reduction. So your 2 set bonus, melee attacks have a chance to make your next spinning crane kick free, and then free spinning crane kicks grant Ebon Toes, increasing the damage of your next blackout kick by 100%. So you're going to have juicier blackout kicks. And then Ebon Toes empowered blackout kicks reduce the cooldown of Fists of Fury, Rising Sun Kick, Strike of the Windlord, and Whirling Dragon Punch. So you're going to have a lot of cooldown reduction built into the spec. And honestly, this additional cooldown reduction is going to be hugely beneficial for Windwalker in PVE. In a player versus environment setting, there's a lot of situations where, you know, your abilities essentially desync from each other, or you're holding them for, you know, your different burst windows, right? Windwalker is a very burst oriented class. It's the class that I main now in all content settings: raid, mythic plus, PvP. I think it feels really good to play. It's what I consider the most engaging rotation in the game. But you know, that's not the same opinion for everybody, right? I really enjoy the Phalanx Stomp windows. I enjoy the mastery of Windwalker, right? So never repeating an ability. You know, some people consider it punishing, but if you pre-plan the rotation, you're never going to really fall into a scenario where you have to spam the same ability twice. So yeah, I think cooldown reduction is going to be huge for PvP, especially. But there's going to be a ton of PvE applications, right? Now that I've been raiding on a Windwalker and playing Mythic Plus on a Windwalker again, I can see where the cooldown reduction will be very beneficial. I think you're going to use SCK a lot more than you do now. Currently, with the current set bonus, I find myself trying to get just as many Rising Sun kicks out as I possibly can, and then, you know, channeling Fist of Fury outside of Serenity windows. But this set bonus, increasing your Blackout kick damage by 100%, it's going to make you want to use those SCK procs in higher priority, I think. I think Windwalker is going to be A tier, all right? I don't think it's quite on Arms Warrior level. From a PvP perspective, you are a wrecking ball in the arena, but you don't have the same team utility that an Arms Warrior has, right? So you can make it so you don't die, even against Subtlety Rogues, who historically have kind of farmed Windwalkers. I think Windwalkers are in a much tankier place as this expansion's progressed. You know, it just feels like a great brawling class to play in an arena. So yeah, I think you're going to enjoy it. It also just got a big damage buff, which will help it out in Mythic Plus. It'll help it out in Raid, and it'll help it out in Arena. So your Rising Sun Kick and your Fist of Fury have both been buffed, and they even threw a little buff at Whirling Dragon Punch, which, because Whirling Dragon Punch is buffed by 50% in PvP, I think you're going to extract some additional value out of that. Yeah, if you have ever wanted to play a Windwalker, this might be and you haven't done it before, this might be a tough time to want to jump into it, because you have a lot of reworks going on, right? So Rec got a rework this expansion. Havoc Demon Hunter's getting a rework. Unholy DK has been pretty well reworked. You know, Subtlety Rogue, Outlaw Rogue, Assassination Rogue, they've all been reworked. Arms Warriors, this hyper bleed focus build. But if you can get past all the reworks and just try to play a very fun class in Windwalker Monk, you will not be disappointed. It's a very engaging class. Mage Tower is fun on it. You know, you bring an exclusive raid buff, right? So you buff all melee DPS by 5%, so you'll always find a place in a raid as a Windwalker Monk. You know, in my opinion, and you do pretty incredible single target damage. You know, you're just above middle of the pack, but your burst single target is light years above most classes. And speaking of burst single target damage, let's jump into Unholy DK, which has historically been a class that I've, you know, tried to continue to popularize on the channel. You know, I play it every season to at least unlock an elite set on it. I've played it in very high Mythic Plus scenarios. I've played it in very high arena scenarios. You know, and I've rated on Mythic on an Unholy DK. So Unholy, again, is looking, in my opinion, pretty solid, right? So let's check out the Death Knight set bonus. I read over this the other day. I just don't remember it off the top of my head. But Apocalypse summons an additional Magus of the Dead, and your Magus of the Dead Shadow Bolt now fires a volley of Shadow Bolts at up to 4 nearby enemies. That's going to be pretty cool. Especially in Arena, I think, because you're summoning a Magus of the Dead every 30 seconds. And then the 4-set bonus. Each rune you spend increases the duration of your active Magus by half a second, and your Magus will now also cast Amplify damage, increasing the damage you deal by 5% for 10 seconds. So you're going to get 5% additional damage on your Magus to all of your abilities, and it's going to be an AoE debuff that goes out, which I think is pretty strong for Unholy, right? Any modifier, any damage modifier you can stack with Unholy is going to treat you very well, because it is a class that thrives on damage amps, right? I think the success of Augmentation Evoker this season shows how good any damage amp is for an Unholy DK or a Windwalker Monk, or an Arms Warrior, but especially Unholy DK. Unholy DK put out some staggering numbers this patch in a PVE setting. It was the single best melee DPS in Raid, in my opinion, from just like a monster burst DPS perspective. You had Augmentation Evokers buffing Unholy DKs, doing, millions and millions of damage per second. So any damage, any percent damage increase you can stack in your Unholy Go is going to treat you well in both PvE and PvP scenarios. And Unholy actually had a lot of success in PvP as well, where Mez and Trill were playing Unholy DK Augmentation Evoker in AWC this season, with Sea-Doo playing what is it, Preservation Evoker as well with that comp. So DKs and dragons, they go very well together, whether you're raiding, whether you're in Mythic Plus, or whether you're PvPing. And having said that, I would say Unholy DK is pretty easily A tier. You could make an argument for Super Gosu, but I think it belongs more in the A tier. You still are going to have some survivability issues. Deathstrike is still nowhere near where it used to be. So you're going to be playing, more as a ranged hybrid class, pumping out a lot of death coils, kiting when you have to, chains of icing your targets, and kind of, pulling them away in a PvP setting. Mythic Plus, you're a ramp class, so you're not as good until higher keys, which usually makes Unholy feel awkward, like when you start out a patch, especially if you didn't gear it the season before. But as you get into like 17s and 18s, 19s, and finally like 20 plus keys, Unholy feels really good to bring. It just kind of feels not as good until you get there, unless you focus on single target damage and just murdering bosses and letting your friends kind of do more of the damage in the trash pulls on those lower keys. So I would say Unholy DK feels solid in the A tier. I think the fact that you're going to see a lot of Arms Warriors and a lot of Sub Rogues, will make Unholy DK feel a little bit worse. But you might see, Windwalker DK coming back this patch. It's always in a pretty decent spot. I played a bit of it early this season, and it's a pretty good time. I think Unholy's A tier because of how good it is in Raid, because it's very good in high keys, and also you're getting the new solo battleground, like solo shuffle RBG game mode this season, and Unholy will be very good into that as well. So yeah, I think it's a solid A tier pick. Demon Hunter. So Demon Hunter is getting an entire class rework. I think you're going to have some solid damage. They got rid of Fodder to the Flame, and they're not really giving anything to replace that at the moment. Usually when a class gets reworked, it's immediately Super Gosu. At least it has been this expansion. Historically, that hasn't always been the case. But I mean, I've mained Demon Hunter in Mythic. I've actually got a cutting edge title, from playing Demon Hunter back in Legion. I've played it. I was top 7 Demon Hunter at the beginning of this season, you know, in the world. And then I just stopped playing it. I got a little bit bored of the playstyle in Shuffle. And I've played it in very high keys, right? I think like 32 to 3,500 plus score. I just, you know, the set bonus doesn't look bad, right? So each slash of Blade Dance has a 50% chance to throw glaive an enemy for 35% damage. You're just going to be proccing Blade Dances, which is going to allow you to do more passive damage with the new Bloodletting dot, which is like the old throw glaive dot essentially, but it's chaos focus now as opposed to just a bleed. And then throw glaive reduces the remaining cooldown of the hunt by 4 seconds. And the hunt's damage over time effect lasts 4 seconds longer. So you're going to be proccing glaives like crazy. You'll probably get a hunt out 30 seconds faster than you normally would have, which brings the hunt's cooldown closer to a minute. I mean, it's a passive set bonus, but I think it's going to play very well into Havoc's Mythic Plus build, which actually probably bumps it up to A tier. I know they're reworking it, but yeah, I could see Demon Hunter fitting in the A tier next season with its set bonus. You know, it's a passive set bonus that doesn't change too much, but it kind of marries you to a bleed build, right? So I think I think Demon Hunter is going to be a safe pick, much like Windwalker Monk. It brings a raid specific buff, right, to any raid or mythic team. So if you have like more of a magic focused team, Havoc Demon Hunter is generally going to complement it very well. Is it going to complement it better than a rogue, right? Is it better to slot a rogue in, you know, for the rogue utilities that rogue brings to a key, right? Sub is going to do massive damage as well. I don't know. I kind of feel like it's still B tier. I kind of feel like it's still B tier. I would say Havoc's probably going to have a nice middle of the pack expansion with the rework. I think you'll see some good damage coming out of it. It's a safe bet to bring into any key. You're not going to have trouble doing 20s on your Havoc Demon Hunter. You'll definitely find a raid spot. And in PvP, you'll probably be a little bit squishy without Fodder to the Flame. It's kind of a big Demon Hunter crutch. But if you play it right, Havoc could easily go to like A, or, you know, if you're MVQ level, Super Gosu. But I think for the majority of players, it'll probably be B tier, you know, A or B tier across the board. So I think it's a safe pick. I just don't think it's super fun. Retribution Paladin, right? I think Ret is going to be in a very strong spot next season. I wouldn't quite call it Super Gosu tier. I don't know that any melee is truly Arms Warrior tier. Oh, I do see one for sure. There is one melee on this sheet that is Arms Warrior Super Gosu tier, and I think most people already know what it is. Retribution Paladin's playing incredibly well in PVE right now. It's got some pretty solid single target damage. In addition to its single target damage, it does some pretty good sustained AoE. It's not doing like Windwalker Monk style burst AoE, but it is, you know, it's there. It's definitely banging. Does great in keys. It brings a battle res now, which is kind of massive, right? Historically, it's been tough to slot Rets into a position in keys because they have all the utility in the world, but they didn't bring that battle res. So now they do bring that battle res. It's a very simple class to play, so you can kind of, you know, just jump into it, you know, get some starter gear and essentially feel powerful on the class, right? Not all classes feel that way. Warrior being one of them. Warrior is very gear dependent. I would say Death Knights are pretty gear dependent. Sub Rogue is not as gear dependent. So, you know, Red is one of those classes that's not super gear dependent. Let's take a look at what our set bonus is going to be for Retribution Paladin. Your 2-set Expurgation, so they're going to try to push this dot focus build this season, I bet. Lasts an additional 3 seconds and deals 50% increased damage. That's huge. Casting Judgment or Divine Toll on a target with Expurgation causes Wrathful Sanction, dealing holy damage to the target and resonating 20% of that holy damage to 4 nearby enemies. That's kind of obscene. So red is going to be actually very interesting in keys with that 2 set, and the 4 set bonus, Wrathful Sanction, grants you Echoes of Wrath, causing your next Templar's Verdict or Divine Storm to deal damage at a second time at 50% effectiveness, and the effect does not consume Judgment. So it may not have that extra buff from Judgment, or it's just not going to consume the effect from Judgment, and you're going to layer on the damage there. That could be absolutely absurd next season with this set bonus. It's a bit wordy, but it just means more damage. And they're going to try to push Expurgation, which is going to feed into that ret melee or ranged melee playstyle even more, because now you're getting a bleed up on people and random holy damage when judgments or divine tolls are going out. So yeah, red is going to be pretty strong depending on how that set bonus shakes out. You might see some pretty fat one-shot builds coming around Ret Paladin. I think anytime they do something that empowers a Retribution Paladin finisher, they kind of tread into that territory of turning it into just this one-shot specialist. So I think red is going to look very strong next tier. If actually Red Warrior is probably going to be pretty absurd, because Arms Warrior is going to enable the Ret Paladin to stay alive even longer because it's going to get 2 intervenes, and then Ret Paladin has 1 minute sacrifice still going into next tier, I believe. So yeah, I mean, these guys could actually dance on the same tier. I'll keep it in A tier for now, but you might see some pretty wild things out of Ret Paladins next season. Enhancement Shamans, I think Enhancement Shamans are more middle of the pack. The way that you play them in PvP, I don't think is that fun. You're just waiting to proc Ascendance, pop your Doom Winds, and one-shot somebody. They rely very heavily on Burrow. It's just not a super fun playstyle. I've played Enhancement to some pretty high levels in the past, in keys, raids, and PvP. But it's fun. It's definitely a fun class. I'll say that. Is it as fun as any of the other classes that I've kind of graded so far? I don't think so. That's just my opinion. I really don't like Ascendance as a cooldown. It's a 3-minute cooldown. I try to stay away from classes with 3 minutes. It's just not a fun wait, right? Waiting 3 minutes in between your major cooldown. And the proc-based Ascendance build. I love procs, but I think even that's a little bit too ridiculous on how RNG it is. You're probably more of a sidekick role in Arena, which that's where you usually are, right? You're more of a support melee, trying to get kept alive until you can one-shot somebody, essentially. So it's a lot of kiting. You're going to work well with Turbo. You'll work well with, Beast Mastery, Beast Cleave. You'll probably work well with Outlaw Rogue now that Outlaw is getting a rework, and you'll probably see them in Arena again. So, I think middle of the pack is a safe spot for Enhancement Shaman. Subtlety Rogue, World of Roguecraft, right? So, what do we have here for Sub Rogue? First of all, the rework looks absolutely insane so far on PTR. Let's take a look at the set bonus. Using Eviscerate, Rupture, or Black Powder has a chance to summon a Shadow Clone to echo your finishing move for 50% additional damage. So that's absurd. And then set bonuses, your 4-set rather, your Shadow Clones deal 10% increased damage with all attacks and grant you 2 combo points per clone when summoned. This ties into the Shadow Clone finisher that they have. They're just buffing that. Those secret technique goes even more in PvP, which I think is a little bit absurd. They're reworking the tree so you can play sub in many different ways. You already had two main builds in PvP. That kind of echo, and really one style, which is just like this damage heavy focus build in PvE. But it feels really good to play in PvE. Subtlety Rogue historically has had a very difficult rotation to bring into a PvE setting, but it feels really good right now. It's just very simple, right? You have Shadow Dance windows, and you play into those windows. It's going to play similarly with the rework, but now Shadow Blades is going to be this absurd damage cooldown. So it's a 2-minute cooldown, buffs your damage by 20%, and does everything else Shadow Blades used to do. Or no, actually, it's giving you a full combo points or 4 combo points for every combo point generating ability. So it's a true DPS cooldown. Subtlety Rogues in a Shadow Blades window. And again, this is a 3-minute cooldown that was now taken down to a 2-minute cooldown and made more powerful. So you're going to get access to Shadow Blades even more than you did in a key, in an arena, in a raid setting. I think Sub Rogue is going to be one of the most fun classes to play next patch. You really can't go wrong. You're going to absolutely eat a lot of classes in Arena. You're going to be one of the strongest classes in Mythic Plus, and in a raid setting, you might lose to like an Assassination Rogue, but because it's so simple to play now, and you're getting so much power in your PVE DPS cooldown in Shadow Blades, I think this is a lot of fun. A lot of people have historically stayed away from Sub Rogue because they thought it's too difficult to play, but I have to tell you, after just gearing one and throwing it in Shuffle and throwing it into a few keys this season, very simple. This is the simplest version of Subtlety Rogue you'll ever find, and it's going to also be the most powerful. So I think you'll probably see a lot of Subtlety Rogue rerolls this patch, which historically that hasn't been good for Windwalkers, Death Knights, Havoc Demon Hunters, Enhancement Shamans. So I think that's where you see some of these guys pushing down. Now, do you have outplay potential against Subtlety Rogues in Arena as any of those classes? Definitely as Windwalker. DK, you don't have the same kind of mobility and tankiness that Windwalker has. That's actually sounds crazy to say because Windwalker has better mobility and tankiness in a Death Knight right now. But I think you guys can definitely make them work. I think Demon Hunters and Enhancement Shamans are going to be absolute food for Subtlety Rogues this patch, and that's just my opinion. Frost Death Knight, I got to go with Dogwater here. I don't think they're ever going to get Frost DK down in the way that it should be, right? It's just not great. It's a very simple rotation. Really what they could do with Frost DK is just go back to Wrath, right? I would like to see them to go back to Wrath for Unholy and Frost, take those trees out, superimpose them on the Dragonflight trees, and just bring Wrath DK back. It could be the last patch of Wrath DK, right? What we all have access to on the PTR or on the Wrath servers now. But I think Wrath DK plays exponentially better than retail DK in every single way. I think the way that you manage your diseases in Wrath is a much healthier way of playing the game. It just feels better to play in general. I've played a lot of Frost DK in my day. I think it will be good in Raid. It'll probably get overshadowed by Unholy in most scenarios. The Breath of Sindracosa build is what it is, right? You get in what you get out what you put into that one. It's a pretty simple build to play, but there's a lot of little nuances there that make it, better or worse. It's always a decent spec in keys because Frost historically does very well in Cleave, and you have 1-minute goes on Frost DK, so that leads very well into a key environment. You also have Anti-Magic Zone, which can help out your team, but you're really not a specialist in anything. Whereas Unholy is your this single target or quadratic scaling specialist. Frost is just kind of like, here you go, right? Here's a simple way to play Death Knight that ends up not being that fun. So, you know, I just think Frost DK needs a rework, right? Maybe not dog water, but for sure needs a rework. Survival Hunter. Well, let's take a look at Frost DK's set bonus real quick. Chill Streak's range is increased by 4 yards and can bounce off of you. Okay, so that'll make Chill Streak feel less worse in an arena setting. Each time Chill Streak bounces off an enemy, your damage is increased by 4% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. So that's actually pretty interesting. You're going to have some pretty good Chill Streak goes if you enjoy the current Frost DK play style. And then the 4 set, Chill Streak can bounce 2 additional times, and each time it bounces, you have a 40% chance to gain a rune, reduce Chill Streak cooldown by 5 seconds, or reduce the cooldown of Empower Rune Weapon by 10 seconds. So you're getting some CDR built into Chill Streak. You know, you'll be able to obliterate more, or you'll be able to Chill Streak more, but that really won't help you because you're going to have to, you know, you're still going to have to Chill Streak around certain windows. That's more of a PVE set bonus. And then the cooldown of Empower Rune Weapon by 10 seconds. Again, anything that desyncs Frost from its 1 minute goes, you know, without reducing the cooldown of Pillar of Frost, you're still not going to be able to go any more than you would have, right? So I think that's this is more of a PVE set bonus, the 4 set. But the 2 set could be pretty good for PvP. I still think it just leads to a spec that does not play very well. It's just, I think, hyper simplified. And, you know, you either have to play it the breath way or you have to play it the obliterate way. So, yeah, I think they could definitely do something with Frost DK to, you know, change around the way it plays. But this is the first time ever that they're not nerfing Chill Streak, right? So that's a good thing. Survival Hunter. I think Survival Hunter would be middle of the pack. I believe it's actually getting a bomb focus playstyle again. Fury of the Eagle. So let's take a look at the set bonus. Fury of the Eagle increases you and your pet's critical strike chance by 15% and critical strike damage by 15% for 12 seconds. And then the 4 set, Fury of the Eagle throws a wildfire bomb at your current target at 100% effectiveness, generates 1 charge of wildfire bomb, and increases the damage wildfire bomb deals to your primary target by 40% for 12 seconds. Survival's getting bumped because this is going to play a lot like Shadowlands Survival Hunter. It doesn't have the cluster bombs, which, you know, allowed it to do just crazy uncapped AoE. But I think it's going to be pretty good overall. In Arena, a bomb-focused playstyle is generally a lot of fun, and you didn't use the same legendary in Shadowlands that you did anyway, you didn't use the Wildfire Cluster Bomb in Shadowlands, you used the Wildfire Cluster Bomb legendary in PvE, but you didn't use it in PvP. So this version of Survival is going to play a lot like the version of Survival Hunter of, you know, like the end of Shadowlands, which I think was really good. It won't be as strong as that version of Survival Hunter in Keys, because Wildfire Cluster was where a ton of that you know, bomb damage came from. You had just crazy uncapped AoE on that legendary. But in PvP, I think you're going to be incredibly powerful. You know, you're already a ranged class as a melee hunter. But with this set bonus, you can play even more ranged, right? And with Subtlety Rogue being as powerful as it is, and Rep Paladin being as powerful as it is, and Unholy DK being as powerful as it is, I think you'll have some good partners to kind of run with, right? You could play PHDK, Thug Cleave, or Cupid next season, and even, what do you call it? Jungle. Sorry about that. As Feral looks pretty good next season as well. We're going to use this icon for Feral because we didn't have Feral Druid here. But yeah, I think Survival is, you know, B tier / A tier. We could put it middle of the pack because I think their arms and sub are going to be a lot stronger, and I don't think Survival is going to be as crazy as it was in Keys back in, you know, like at the end of Shadowlands, because it's not going to have that wildfire cluster bomb enabling legendary. All right. So now we'll go into Feral Druid. I think Feral Druid is going to be solidly middle of the pack. You know, you have some good comps in PvP that you can play with. You're going to have some limited survivability, which I think that is also what kind of hurts survival with these other classes that, you know, really feed on this B tier of classes in the arena. Feral Druid is going to be pretty strong. But again, lower survivability, right? If you queue into a Feral Druid right now, you train the Druid and you win the game. Keep them in bear form. They're not doing crazy damage. They're not cloning. They're not proccing Feral Frenzies. You know, you can pretty much put a Feral Druid on an island by training them into the ground. In keys, they were very meta this season at one point. They aren't at that point anymore, but they're still pretty strong. Single target DPS is a little bit lackluster. I think it's been better in the past, but it's not in a terrible spot. Can you have fun on a Feral Druid? Absolutely. You can have fun on any of these B tier classes, and I try to be a little bit more realistic with my tier lists, where you won't see, you know, Super Gosu 5 classes across, right? It takes some pretty crazy reworks or some pretty crazy damage and team utility. Like, you have to be a complete package class to get up there. Feral Druid's really not a complete package, but Druid in general is a fun class to play, right? So Feral could be a good main if you like playing multiple roles in World of Warcraft, right? So if you enjoy healing, if you enjoy range DPS, if you enjoy tanking, right? Druid's got it all. So I think it's a solid middle of the pack pick. The set bonus on Feral Frenzy grants Smoldering Frenzy, increasing all damage you deal by 20% for 8 seconds. Okay, that's kind of crazy. And then Feral Frenzy's cooldown is reduced by 15 seconds, so now it's a 30-second cooldown. During Smoldering Frenzy, enemies burn for 10% of damage you deal as fire over 10 seconds. That's going to be pretty strong with a Survival Hunter, actually. I mean, there could probably be an argument made for Survival and Feral going up to A tier based on these tier sets alone. Feral's also got that PvP talent where if you land a Cyclone, you proc a Feral Frenzy, right? So you're just going to be doing 20% more damage all the time, essentially. So yeah, I think Feral's going to be pretty strong, but again, your weakness is getting trained, same as Survival Hunter, and you're not super meta, right? None of these classes are going to be super meta in PvE, outside of, you do need one Havoc Demon Hunter. I think we could actually move Havoc up to A tier based on that, right? Brings a very unique raid buff. These three really don't, although Enhancement brings Wind Fury, which is pretty strong for other melees. I just don't think it's strong enough to bump it up a tier. Whereas Havoc Demon Hunter, yeah, I could see Havoc being A tier with the rework because it's going to be strong in keys, it's going to be strong in raid, and it's going to be a little weak in PvP, whereas Feral Druid is just going to be kind of middle of the pack in all three. And I think you'll see that here with all of these. So that's our boys in Feral. Great set bonus. Solid middle of the pack pick. I don't think it's as strong as the A tiers and definitely not as strong as the S tiers, but I think you have a lot of fun to be had on this specialization. This leads us into Outlaw Rogue, right? Outlaw Rogue. I'm going to lower this World of Warcraft sound in my background. It was a lot of fun for a while, but it's at this stage of the video, we got to come off of that sound. So Outlaw Rogue, the set bonus for Outlaw Rogue, we'll dive right into it. First of all, Outlaw is getting a massive rework next patch, and it looks absolutely awesome. The set bonus, Sinister Strike, has a 15% additional chance of striking an additional time. So you're going to just keep rolling these procced Sinister Strikes, because that's what Outlaw was doing already. And then Roll the Bones additionally refreshes a random Roll the Bones combat enhancement buff that you currently possess for 40 seconds. So you're going to get a buff from Roll the Bones and then refresh the existing buff. So you'll be able to stack buffs on Roll the Bones. Seems like pretty quickly if that's how it works. So it seems like that set bonus will remove a bit of the re-rolling that you had to do in Outlaw, which is going to be a good thing. Outlaw and Mythic Plus is going to be absolutely absurd. I don't think that you could move Outlaw under an A tier, just based on the fact that it's going to be doing even better in Mythic Plus now. It's historically been one of the better Mythic Plus specs in the game. It's always very good in Raid. Well, except like the last couple patches, actually, it's been quite behind the other rogue specializations, but this rework's going to put it in a very interesting spot. And when Outlaw is good, you get to play some pretty interesting comps with Outlaw, right? Ret Rogue with Outlaw could be very strong next season. Ret Enhancement Shaman could be quite good with Outlaw Rogue. You might even see Arms Warrior Outlaw Rogue coming into play. And if and honestly, you could see some Windwalker Outlaw Rogue. There's a lot of melee comps I think that fit well with an Outlaw Rogue. We've seen DK Outlaw in the past as well. I mean, yeah, I think it's in a solid spot. I don't think it's subtlety god tier, super Gosu, but it's definitely in the A tier next patch. Yeah, in a very good spot. And then Assassination Rogue. Assassination's also getting a rework, but I think it's going to be overshadowed by Subtlety and Outlaw. So the set bonus for Assassination, your 2 set, each 10 energy you spend grants Nature Blight, granting 1% attack speed and 1% nature damage for 6 seconds. Multiple instances of Nature Blight may overlap, up to 15. I'm going to assume that you can't just keep them rolling forever at 15 stacks. That would be absurd. And then the 4 set bonus, Envenom with Envenom active explodes, dealing nature damage to all enemies within 8 yards, deals reduced damage beyond 8 targets. So on your big burst windows, your Toxic Blade windows, that second Envenom will hit very hard in AoE, which is pretty good for AoE because at that point you're just going to get your AoE bleed up in Mythic Plus. Get your second Envenom is going to be big AoE damage. I think that's pretty cool. I think it's a good set bonus. The rework is going to make Assassination Rogue better to play in Mythic Plus, but I don't know that you're going to see an Assassination Rogue meta jump out from the rework versus like Subtlety or Outlaw Rogue, right? I think it's just very difficult to, try to make Assassination Rogue an AoE focused class because it's going to suffer from the same thing like an Unholy DK does, right? You need targets to live longer because you're a bleed based class. So you might do very well in high keys, but you're going to feel pretty bad in keys, in your lower keys. And then in addition to that, Subtlety Rogue is just so simple to play in keys. I don't know how you get better than Subtlety, right? In a key, because you do insane AoE damage, you do insane single target damage, you have these wild burst windows, your clones are getting buffed, so your secret technique goes, which you can do a secret technique go every 30 seconds right now. I'm not sure what it's going to be after the rework, but that's going to be massively buffed, and that's huge for Mythic Plus, for Raid, for everything. So I think Assassination will be very good. I think there's going to be some niche scenarios where Assassination, is this wild Super Gosu class. I think you'll see some crazy one-shot builds, be put together out of Assassination Rogue in Arena. But I don't think it's going to be as good as Subtlety or Outlaw in keys. And because they're doing so much with AoE, it might lose a little bit of that single target edge that it's had over the classes, previously. So I think it'll still be kind of a middle of the pack class. I think with Subtlety getting a rework and Outlaw, that means there's just less room for people to want to play Assassination Rogue, unfortunately. But it's not dog water. None of the classes are dog water except Frost DK. Really needs a rework. This is my opinion on our melee classes going into 10.2. We looked at PvP. We looked at PVE. We looked at our set bonuses. I think we did a pretty good job here. So, guys, I hope you have a good 10.2. I will try to start making more videos. I've been kind of out of it for a little bit, just focusing on my own health changes and some real quality time with my family. So I appreciate you guys. I see you coming back to the channel. I see you commenting. I see you guys engaging and watching with the older videos because a lot of them are still relevant today in Wrath of the Lich King and in Classic WoW and even in Dragonflight. So have a good day, have a good week, have a good night, or have a good month, and have a good year. Tomato sauce and out in are all melees, except maybe Frosty K in 10.2. Take it easy, guys. Have a good one.